What if the very traits that define a dictator, the iron-fisted control, the visceral charisma, the cult of personality, are the very chains that bind you to an inevitable downfall? Would you seize power, or would you stumble, gasping for breath, into a pit of your own making? In the twisted theater of World War II, where allegiances shifted like sand dunes and the scent of betrayal hung thick in the air, one misstep could annihilate your dreams of dominion. Picture a world where every whisper is a dagger, every smile a potential betrayal. The stakes? Life and death. The price of failure? A bullet in the back, a noose around your neck. Dictatorship isn't just a title, it's a tightrope walk over a volcano, and every audience member has a score to settle. You think you're ready? Consider this: you may speak of destiny, yet you're but a pawn in a game played by ruthless kings and queens of subterfuge. Hitler, Stalin, Mussolini, they didn't just conquer territories, they orchestrated symphonies of chaos, their notes bleeding into the lives of millions. They understood danger intimately. They were the grim reapers of their own ambitions. Think you can outwit them? Spoiler alert, history is littered with the corpses of the overconfident. What about your advisors? Are they loyal confidants or vipers basking in your shadow? One echoed flattery too many, and you'll be drowning in a sea of poisoned chalices. Every sycophant is a potential assassin, wielding compliments sharper than any knife. And while you're busy polishing your dictatorship, they'll be sharpening their blades. The false sense of security? That's the quiet before the storm, the unsettling lull that screams, "You're next." Now, let's talk resources. The military might? A rusted sword against the tempest. Supplies dwindling? Morale plummeting? While you're feasting on gourmet meals, your soldiers are eating dirt, literally. History has a wicked sense of humor, and starving armies don't march to your beat. They march to the sound of grumbling stomachs and the promise of a better future without you. What of the resistance? You envision a rabble of dissenters, faceless and disorganized, but they're more like shadows in the night, lurking, waiting. They're the cockroaches that scurry when the lights go out, and trust me, they've got the cunning of a fox and the ferocity of a lion. You might crush one uprising, but with every death, another will rise, fueled by vengeance and the martyrdom of the fallen. And let's not forget the world stage. Allies? They're only allies until they're not. A diplomatic misstep, a miscalculated gesture, and you'll find yourself as popular as a tyrant at a democracy convention. Isolation is a fate worse than death. As you sip your last glass of wine, realize this: in the brutal arena of dictatorship, the only guarantee is your own demise. So here's the question: will you rise like a phoenix or burn like the countless tyrants before you? The answer, my would-be dictator, is written in blood and betrayal. The clock is ticking. Can you handle the heat, or will you become just another forgotten name etched into the annals of history? The air thickens, a silence heavy enough to crush bones, as the dim light flickers in the shadowed corners of an abandoned cafe. We're not safe here, not anymore. The cafe's old wooden tables are scarred by the weight of whispered secrets and broken dreams, as if the very walls strained to remember the laughter once echoing within. I remember, oh, how I remember, the taste of hope that hung like smoke in the air, just before it choked us all. Anton is hunched over in the far corner, his hands trembling around a chipped coffee cup. It's empty now, and the bitter dregs swirl like memories of a time when passion flowed freely. His eyes dart toward the door, every creak of the aging hinges making him flinch, a soldier on the battlefield of his own fear. I can see it in his face, the desperation etched in the lines of worry that deepen with each passing hour. He's not just afraid for himself, it's his wife, Lena, who haunts his thoughts, eyes wide with worry, as if they could see the future, a future that darkens like a storm cloud swelling over the horizon. I remember the way Anton spoke of Lena, his voice a melody, vibrant with tenderness. She's like the first bloom of spring, he said one damp afternoon, eyes shining with the light of 1,000 promises. Now, that spring feels like a distant memory, buried beneath layers of dread as the political landscape warps and twists, suffocating the light. The streets outside pulse with fear, shadows moving with purpose, faces hidden beneath hoods and hats, eyes suspicious and weary. The very air crackles with tension, a palpable reminder of the dictators rising, like dark titans from the ashes of hope. Then there's Elena, her silhouette framed against the haunting glow of the street lamp outside, the light catching the edges of her resolute jaw. She's a fighter, a firecracker wrapped in a dreamer's attire. Her fists, small but fierce, have shaken with defiance at the empty promises of leaders who twist words like knives, wielding them to cut through the fragile fabric of society. She's seen too much, felt too deeply, an emotional hurricane in a world that demands calm. We won't go quietly, she insists, eyes aflame with rebellion. They can't snuff out our dreams. But dreams are a dangerous thing in a time like this, a double-edged sword that can pierce or protect. I remember the night she stood on that rickety stool in the town square, her voice rising above the murmur of the crowd, a battle cry against the rising tide of oppression. We are not just shadows. We are the architects of our fate. Her words laced through the air, igniting something deep within those who huddled close, desperate for a glimpse of the light she promised. But the shadows have a way of swallowing the light whole, and I could see it in the way the crowd grew uncertain, murmurs of fear rippling like a soft wave moving through water. As the days stretch into weeks, the tension mounts, a taut string ready to snap. The radio crackles to life, voices echoing with propaganda, promises washed in the colors of false hope. I remember those chilling broadcasts, the way they twisted the truth into a grotesque tapestry that painted our neighbors as enemies, our friends as traitors. Fear became the currency of the realm. Anton listened in silence, his heart beating a frantic rhythm, torn between the love for his wife and the gnawing dread that perhaps the fight was futile. The night thickens, an inky blackness that slithers through the cracks of our defenses. I glance at Anton, his eyes wide with a terror that clutches at my chest. He knows something is coming. Elena, he whispers, his voice a fragile thread, as if saying her name out loud might summon her spirit to fight back against the encroaching darkness. But Elena is already at the door, her determination like a beacon illuminated against the suffocating night. She calls for him, her voice cutting through the silence like a knife. Come with me, she cries, pulling him from the shadows, and I wonder if she knows how close we are to the edge, how every heartbeat might be the last. We're caught in a web of choices, each one a paradox, a reflection of our deepest fears and desires. The streets are alive with whispers, a swirling mass of humanity caught in a dance of desperation, each step forward an act of defiance. The confrontation is inevitable, an explosion waiting for the spark. What are we waiting for? Elena shouts, her rallying cry echoing through the alleyways, and I see the flicker of hope ignite in Anton's eyes, even as doubt lingers like a ghost. He reaches for her hand, trembling but resolute. For the truth, he replies, his voice barely above a whisper, yet it carries the weight of their shared dreams. With every heartbeat, the cacophony of the city swells, a symphony of chaos, a rhythm that echoes the pulse of a society on the brink. Shadows swirl around us, becoming the ghosts of those lost, of lives shattered by the iron grip of tyranny. We are not alone. Each breath is a witness, every whispered word a testament to the power that still flickers like a dying flame, refusing to be extinguished. And then, in that breathless moment, we surge forward, propelled by a mix of fear and hope, the night opening before us like a portal to the unknown. The air is electric, charged with the possibility of change, and I know, in that heartbeat, that the rise of dictatorship is not just a story of oppression but a canvas painted with the colors of resistance, painted with the struggles of souls united against the dark. It is here, at this precipice of despair and hope, that our journey intertwines with the haunting echoes of history, and the shadows whisper of battles yet to come, of voices that will not be silenced. Where the rise of dictatorship meets the unyielding spirit of humanity, we stand together, teetering on the edge of a new dawn. The air crackles with tension, thick and suffocating, as a single voice cuts through the murmur of the crowd, sharp and commanding. Silence! The sound reverberates in the cold night air, penetrating hearts and freezing breaths. The moon hangs high above, a silent witness to the spectacle unfolding beneath its ghostly glow. A figure stands on the stage, silhouetted against the dim lights, the embodiment of authority, a living paradox, a dictator cloaked in charisma and fear. I remember the first time I saw him, his eyes, dark pools of ambition, flickering with a flame that could ignite nations, or consume them whole. Gregory Voss, the great orator, the extractor of loyalty from reluctant hearts. He was a man who understood the pulse of the people, their fears, their desires. But beneath that polished veneer lay a mind as twisted as the gnarled branches of a haunted tree. And then there's Elena, a woman caught in the crossfire of Voss's aspirations and her own crumbling convictions. A once hopeful journalist, she now found herself within the suffocating grip of a regime that had promised freedom but delivered chains. I remember her voice trembling as she spoke of truth, of integrity, but within her eyes, a glimmer of doubt, a questioning gaze that reflected the horror unfolding around her. Her world had become a jigsaw puzzle with pieces forced together, each one jagged, bleeding. Tonight, the crowd is restless, a sea of faces, some hollow with fear, others alight with fervor. Voss stands taller than life, his voice a haunting melody that dances through the air like smoke. "You are not alone," he bellows. "Together, we will rise like a phoenix from the ashes of our past." The words ignite something primal in the crowd, a wave of adrenaline, a surge of allegiance. And yet, lurking behind every cheer is a whisper, a ghostly echo of dissent. Elena feels it. She moves through the throng, her heart racing, an insurgent in a land of conformity. Each face she passes tells a story of surrender, of lost dreams. She remembers how she used to dream of exposing corruption, of bringing truth to light. Now, the shadows encircle her, and she feels the weight of Voss's charisma crushing her spirit. The laughter that once filled her life has turned hollow, an eerie reminder of what she has lost. Across the city, in a dimly lit room, sits Marcus, a strategist ensnared in Voss's machinations. He is a puppet master, and yet he, too, feels the strings tightening around his own throat. I remember how he once believed in the cause, how the vision of a new world fueled his every thought. Now, as he watches the frenzy outside, he grapples with the creeping realization that he has become part of the darkness he sought to eradicate. An argument brews within him, a tempest swirling. Should he stand by Voss, the man who had given him purpose, or should he fight the very tyranny he had helped create? The laughter of a child echoes in his mind, a reminder of innocence, of purity lost in the political rat race. He clutches his head, as if trying to expel the thoughts, but they cling like shadows, whispering of betrayal. Back at the rally, Voss's voice rises, an intoxicating elixir. "Freedom is a choice. A choice we must make together." The crowd roars, a tidal wave of adulation that crashes against the shores of reason. But there, in the midst of the chaos, Elena clutches her notebook like a lifeline, her breath shallow, each heartbeat resonating with the rebellion brewing within her. And then it happens. A moment hangs in the air, suspended, like the eye of a storm. A single scream pierces the euphoria, a voice drowned in fear but not silenced. It rises from the back of the crowd, raw and primal. "You lie." The word reverberates, electrifying the atmosphere. Elena's heart races, adrenaline flooding her veins. She turns, scanning the faces. Is it courage or madness that drives someone to stand against a force so formidable? Voss's gaze sharpens, his eyes narrowing, the illusion of control beginning to fracture. "Who dares?" His voice slices through the tension, a blade of authority, yet beneath it lies a tremor of uncertainty, the cracks in his facade beginning to show. The crowd stirs, the pendulum of loyalty swinging as fear grasps them. Elena's breath catches, a suffocating wave of urgency. She feels the weight of the world pressing down, every soul around her teetering on a precipice. The atmosphere thickens with dread. Marcus watches from his shadows, knowing that this moment could tilt the balance of power. "Who dares?" Voss repeats, and the crowd holds its breath, a collective heartbeat echoing the uncertainty. Elena feels pulled, a string tugged taut between fear and the burning desire to reveal the truth. She remembers the faces of the oppressed, the cries for justice that haunt her at night. They cannot be muffled any longer. And then, from the depths of the crowd, a figure steps forward, trembling yet resolute. Time stretches, seconds echo, a heartbeat in a hollow void. Voss's expression shifts, an icy mask slipping to reveal the raw edge of his fury. "Speak," he commands, his voice a low growl, and the crowd leans in, curiosity entwined with dread. Elena knows this is a perilous moment, a fragile thread woven into the fabric of fate. The air hums with anticipation, the universe holding its breath, caught in the tension of what is to come. But as the figure speaks, the words that tumble forth are lost in the whirlwind of emotion, their weight too heavy to bear. The confrontation is not merely of voices, but of souls, a clash of ideals that will ripple through the fabric of their reality. Elena's mind races, caught between the urge to flee and the need to stand her ground. Every ounce of her being screams for action, yet the shadows of doubt linger, draping her in uncertainty. Marcus feels the pulse of the moment, hearts pounding against the walls he helped fortify. Voss, for all his bravado, is a man straddling the abyss, a tyrant on the brink of unraveling. The roar of the crowd crescendos, a symphony of chaos and loyalty as the night deepens, thick with shadows that loom like ghosts of unfulfilled dreams. The tension builds with every heartbeat, a crescendo of raw emotion, and the world spins on the axis of fear and desire. In that haunted moment, everything hangs in the balance, the air electric with the promise of change, the promise of a world reborn or irrevocably shattered. The stage is set, and as the clock ticks toward the inevitable, we are left to ponder the question that haunts us all: what makes a successful dictator? What sacrifices, what betrayals, what twisted truths must be embraced in the dark corridors of power? The answer, pulsing with the lifeblood of humanity, remains shrouded, waiting for the next act to unfold. The sirens wailed like banshees in the night, cutting through the air with a chilling urgency that made the very ground tremble beneath my feet. I stood there, frozen, heart pounding like a relentless drum, each thud echoing the dread curling in my stomach. A thick fog clung to the streets, swirling in ghostly tendrils around the dimly lit faces of the crowd. Fear hung heavy in the air, thick enough to taste, palpable as the smoke suffocating the horizon. "Do you see it?" A voice, my friend Sam's, shattered the silence, sharp and jagged. His eyes were wild, darting like a trapped animal. "They're coming for us, Alex." The words wrapped around my throat, choking me. "Who's coming?" I whispered, though deep down, I already knew. The unseen hand of the regime tightened its grip, weaving a narrative that held us captive more effectively than any chain. In the distance, I could see the flash of uniforms, marching like phantoms in the fog, meticulously crafted to invoke fear. "They want us to believe that dissent is treason," Sam spat, but that was before I knew them, the architects of our shared nightmare, and Maria, a once hopeful journalist turned reluctant mouthpiece, and Victor, a soldier shackled by his loyalty to a crumbling system, a man who had lost his dream in the fog of war. Maria stood behind the scenes, her fingers flying across the keyboard, each keystroke a dagger aimed at the heart of dissent. She had once chased the truth with a fervor that lit her spirit, but now, each article she penned felt like a betrayal, a whisper echoing in the void. "We must control the narrative," they told her, their voices seeping into her mind like poison. The lines blurred between right and wrong, and she became a ghost of her former self, haunted by the stories she could no longer tell. Victor, on the other hand, wore his uniform like armor, but it felt more like a shroud. He would often stand at the edge of the city, watching the shadows stretch long and lean, each one a reminder of the choices he'd made. "I follow orders," he would say, yet I could see the tremor in his hands, the flicker of doubt in his eyes. He was a soldier, yes, but he was also a man trying to reconcile the ghosts of his past with the demons of his present. I could see the flicker of rebellion in him, like a candle struggling against the wind, yearning to blaze brightly yet terrified of being snuffed out. As the soldiers advanced, I felt the tension crackle in the air, like the moment before a storm breaks loose. The very ground beneath us felt alive, vibrating with the collective heartbeat of those who dared to stand against the tide. "We can't let them take us," Sam yelled, urgency lacing his voice. "We have to fight back." I looked at him, this brave fool, this embodiment of hope, and my heart surged. I wanted to believe. But then I thought of Maria, typing away in the dark, feeding into the very machine we were trying to dismantle. And Victor, standing sentinel, torn between duty and his own crumbling ideals. The weight of their choices pressed down on us all like a shroud. Propaganda was not merely words on a page, it was a living, breathing entity, a narrative woven so tightly into our lives that it was impossible to unravel without tearing apart the very fabric of our existence. The sirens wailed again, reverberating through the alley, each cry a death knell for our dreams. I could see their faces now, the soldiers, cold and unyielding, marching as if they were the very harbingers of a new dawn. But what kind of dawn could emerge from such darkness? The lines of reality blurred in my mind, and I felt lost in a labyrinth built from fear and despair. "Stand together!" I shouted, my voice almost lost beneath the clamor of marching boots and pounding hearts. "This is our moment." I raised my hands, but even as I did, I felt the chasm widening between my resolve and the reality of our situation. A part of me trembled at the thought of what might come next, the crushing weight of retribution, the oppressive silence that follows defiance. "Alex," Sam's voice was a whisper now, trembling like the flickering streetlight above us. "What if we're wrong?" And in that moment, I felt the universe shrink around me, the stars blotted out by the darkness of our choices, the cosmos laughing at our innocence. I wanted to scream, to tear the air apart with my anguish. I wanted to reach for the truth, but what was truth anymore in a world so wrapped in lies? The soldiers stopped, the silence heavy with anticipation. I could almost hear the heartbeats of my comrades, pounding like a frantic drum, each one a rallying cry against the suffocating narrative that sought to bind us. I caught a glance from Victor, those haunted eyes filled with the weight of the world, a plea for understanding glimmering beneath the surface. And Maria, wherever she was, I felt her presence like a distant memory, an echo of the truth that had once burned bright within her. And as the tension reached a fever pitch, I knew this was more than just a fight for survival. It was a battle for our souls, a desperate attempt to reclaim our narrative from the grips of those who sought to silence us. The fog swirled around us, thick and cloying, yet amidst the shadows, I felt a spark ignite. In that heartbeat of uncertainty, as the soldiers squared their shoulders, I could almost believe that we were stronger together, like a constellation born from chaos, waiting to illuminate the night. The air crackled with tension, a stillness that wrapped around Captain Elena Vargas like a vice grip. She stood on the crumbling edge of a forgotten city, the horizon painted in twilight hues, where shadows danced like phantoms. Beneath her feet lay the remnants of a world once vibrant, now reduced to whispers and echoes. The distant thud of boots echoed an ominous rhythm, a haunting prelude to the chaos about to unfold. She could feel it in her bones, a storm brewing, not of thunder and rain, but of betrayal and blood. Elena's heart thundered in her chest, each beat a reminder of her purpose, her duty to those who trusted her. But doubt seeped through the cracks of her resolve. She remembered the faces of her soldiers, their hopes and dreams intertwined with her own. Ramirez, with his lopsided grin, always cracking jokes even as darkness loomed. And then there was Lila, a fierce warrior whose loyalty burned like a flame, but whose faith now flickered in the face of uncertainty. They were not just soldiers, they were family, bound by choice and circumstance, by love and sacrifice. "Captain?" "We've got movement at the south point," whispered a voice, slicing through the mounting tension. It was Lieutenant Park, his eyes wide with urgency. "They're regrouping." The words hung in the air, heavy with implications. She swallowed hard, the weight of leadership pressing down on her like a shroud. She could feel the eyes of her soldiers on her, searching for strength in her silence, hoping she had the answers. But deep down, she was terrified, terrified of the choices that lay ahead, terrified of the ghosts of war that haunted her nights. Time pulsated, each second stretching like an elastic band ready to snap. Memories flooded her mind, those moments when she had felt invincible, when she had believed in the righteousness of their cause. But now, doubt clawed at her heart. She remembered the time they had fought back against overwhelming odds, when every bullet felt like a prayer. I remember, she whispered to herself, grasping for strength in the familiarity of the past. Elena's gaze shifted to the horizon, where the sun dipped below the ruins, casting long shadows that seemed to mock her resolve. "We need to rally the troops," she said, her voice steady, though inside, she trembled. "We'll take a stand. Together." As she turned to face her men, she caught sight of Ramirez. His grin had faded, replaced by a mask of uncertainty. He was a warrior, yes, but he was also a man, a son, a brother. She could see the flicker of fear in his eyes, reflecting her own. "What if they don't follow us?" he asked, vulnerability cracking through his bravado. "Then we fight," she replied, though the words felt like a stone in her throat. How could she ask them to follow her into the abyss? To trust her when the lines of loyalty began to blur? But the truth was stark, a haunting melody. Without trust, they were mere shadows, flickering in the night. Lila stepped forward, her voice fierce, a beacon in the gathering dusk. "We have each other, that's what matters. Loyalty isn't just about following orders, it's about knowing we'll stand our ground for one another." Her eyes shone with resolute fire, igniting the hearts around her. "We cannot lose sight of that." Elena felt a swell of hope, a fragile flame attempting to pierce through the darkness. They needed more than strategy, they needed a bond forged in the fires of trust. "We fight for each other," she echoed, the words resonating, a shared heartbeat against the encroaching fear. "We fight to protect our home, our families." The air thickened, charged with an electricity that was almost tangible. But the ghosts of doubt lingered, clawing at their resolve. She remembered the faces of those who had come before her, soldiers whose courage had lit the way. They believed in something greater, she thought, the memory swirling like smoke. And so must we. But the battle was not just against an enemy, it was against the creeping shadows of betrayal and the weight of loyalty itself. The enemy outside was mirrored by the enemy within, every soldier wrestling with their own doubts, their own fears. Elena could see it in their faces, the flicker of uncertainty, the haunting question, what if loyalty faltered when it mattered most? As the night deepened, the sound of distant drums echoed, a grim reminder of the approaching storm. With every pulse, Elena's thoughts turned to strategy, but it was a strategy woven with the threads of emotion, of connection. The battle is not just for victory, she reminded herself, but for each other. Suddenly, echoes of laughter pierced the dread, a memory of camaraderie, a fleeting moment that felt like a warm embrace. They had shared stories, recounted dreams under the stars, creating a tapestry of hope amidst the chaos. "I remember," she whispered again, the mantra forging a bond that transcended fear. "Captain, they're advancing." The urgency in Park's voice pulled her back to the present, the weight of the moment crashing down like a tidal wave. She stood tall, drawing strength from the memories and the very real presence of her soldiers, who looked to her for guidance. "Hold the line," she shouted, a battle cry that erupted from her chest, igniting the hearts of her warriors. "We stand together. For our families, for our future." As the night unfolded, chaos erupted, a cacophony of shouts and gunfire painting the air in sharp relief. The shadows of the city danced wildly, becoming a living, breathing entity. Elena charged forward, heart racing, the electric pulse of battle surging through her veins. She fought not just for survival, but for the unbreakable bond that held them all together, a force more powerful than any weapon. In that moment of chaos and courage, she understood. Loyalty wasn't blind allegiance, it was the fierce commitment to stand shoulder to shoulder against the darkness. It was a promise whispered in the night, echoing in the hearts of those who dared to fight. Their lives intertwined, destinies colliding in a storm of resolve. The battle raged on, but amid the chaos, the shadows began to recede, swallowed by the light of their unwavering resolve. Time twisted and stretched, each heartbeat reverberating like a war drum, each breath heavy with the weight of choice. In that crucible of conflict, they were not just armies, they were family, bound by loyalty, their strength unyielding, their spirits unbreakable. As dawn broke, a new day emerged from the ashes of night, but the fight was far from over. The road ahead loomed ominously, but together, they would navigate the darkness, loyal armed forces forged in fire and bound by the heart. And in that truth, they found their greatest weapon, their unwavering bond, relentless and eternal. The sirens screamed like banshees, a relentless wail that clawed at the air. Anna stood frozen, her heart pounding in an erratic rhythm that matched the chaos swirling around her. The streets were a patchwork of desperation, people with hollow eyes, clutching empty wallets, their voices rising in a cacophony of anger and fear. A flicker of flame danced dangerously close to a crumpled newspaper headline, "Crisis hits hard." The truth had never felt so raw, so tangible. She could almost taste the ash in the air, a bitter reminder of dreams turned to smoke. "Stan! Over here," she shouted, her voice almost lost in the tempest. Stan, her brother, emerged from the throng, his face a mask of worry. He was always the practical one, a spreadsheet savant turned reluctant leader. "Did you get the supplies?" she demanded, her voice cutting through the noise like a knife. He shook his head, the weight of the world resting on his shoulders. "They're out. Everything's gone. They're hoarding food like it's gold." Panic bubbled in Anna's chest, a fire that threatened to consume her. She had never seen people act like this, turning on each other, eyes wild with desperation. "What do we do?" "Keep calm," Stan urged, but his voice cracked, a surrender that echoed in her mind. They were in this together, but together felt like quicksand, pulling them deeper into uncertainty. In the distance, a group of protesters surged forward, their chants morphing into a tide of fury. "No more lies. No more hunger." The crowd was an animal, restless and roaring. Anna remembered nights under the stars, where dreams painted possibilities that now felt like distant planets, unreachable and cold. She had thought those dreams would guide her, but now they crumbled like leaves, scattered by a bitter wind. "Anna, listen to me," Stan said, grabbing her shoulders, his grip tightening with urgency. "We need to find a way to get food. We can't wait for the government to save us. There's a warehouse down by the docks, they might still have something." "Are you crazy?" "That's where they're sending the militia. It's a death trap." "Then what's your plan?" His voice rose, desperation spilling over. A moment passed, heavy and thick, as if the very air conspired against them. She could see the shadows of people behind him, their faces twisted in resentment, and she felt the weight of their despair pressing against her chest. I don't know," she stammered, wrestling with a helplessness that churned in her stomach. Every instinct shouted to run, to hide from the storm brewing around them. But as she met Stan's gaze, she saw the flicker of determination amidst the chaos. They were family, bound by blood and fear, and in that fragile connection, she found a flicker of courage. "Okay. We go to the warehouse," she said, her voice steadier now. "But we need to be smart about it." Stan nodded, a flicker of hope igniting in his eyes, but that flicker was dimmed by the reality of the streets. As they moved, shouts erupted behind them, primal screams that pierced the air like arrows. A man stumbled, clutching his side, a dark stain spreading across his shirt, a casualty of desperation. Anna's heart clenched, an icy grip that threatened to freeze her resolve. Was this what they had become? A society unraveling at the seams, clutching at whatever scraps of humanity they had left. They slipped down a narrow alley, the shadows swallowing them whole. The silence was suffocating, a stark contrast to the chaos above. Anna felt the weight of the city pressing down, the bricks of the building towering like giants, watching her every move. "What if we don't make it back?" she whispered, fear leaking into her words. Stan paused, his breath hitching. "We will. We have to." His voice was a tenuous thread, but it was enough to pull her forward. They arrived at the warehouse, a hulking structure looming against the skyline, its broken windows like empty eyes. Inside, the air was thick with despair. Shelves that once held promise stood bare, remnants of hope scattered like fallen leaves. They cautiously stepped deeper, the echoes of their footsteps drowned out by the gnawing silence. Then, a sound, a faint rustle from the shadows. "Who's there?" Anna's voice trembled, the echo of fear slicing through her words. Out of the darkness stepped a figure, gaunt and hollow, with eyes that mirrored the desolation surrounding them. "You shouldn't be here," he rasped, a warning laced with the bitterness of his own suffering. "We're just looking for food," Stan said, holding up his hands, palms out. "We don't want any trouble." But the man laughed, a hollow sound that reverberated against the cold concrete walls. "Trouble found us a long time ago. You think you can come in here and take what you want?" His voice dripped with cynicism, a reflection of a world that had long since turned its back on compassion. Anna felt the tension coil in the air, a storm brewing on the horizon. "Please," she urged, her heart pounding a desperate rhythm. "We're starving." "We'll do anything." "Anything," he repeated, stepping closer, his gaunt features illuminated by a sliver of light. "What if I asked you to betray someone? Would you?" The question hung heavy, a thread woven into their reality. Betrayal? The word echoed like a ghost in her mind. Who could she trust in a world that had abandoned hope? Stan stepped forward, eyes narrowing. No one should have to choose between survival and loyalty. We're all in this together. Together, the man scoffed, shaking his head. Together is a lie. It's every person for themselves now. His words sliced into Anna, a harsh truth that felt so undeniable in that moment. What was left of their society was built on a fragile illusion, teetering on the brink of collapse. In that instant, Anna felt the weight of 1,000 lives pressing down on her, each heartbeat a reminder of the desperation that had taken root. She looked to Stan, to the man, and back to the shadows that danced around them, a swirling uncertainty that clung to her like a second skin. Was this what it meant to survive? To shed every ounce of humanity until all that remained was a hollow shell? The world outside roared, a tempest of voices rising and falling, and as she closed her eyes, she could almost hear the ghosts of their past whispering, echoes of laughter, love, and dreams. But those echoes were fading, suffocated by the weight of hunger, despair, and dissent. "Help us," she pleaded, her voice raw with emotion, desperate to bridge the chasm between survival and humanity. "We'll find a way to make it right." But the man stood silent, a spectre in the shadows, leaving her to ponder the thin line between hope and surrender as the city outside burned. In that fragile moment, amidst the echoes of a world unraveling, Anna understood, this was not just a fight for resources, it was a battle for their very souls, the remnants of who they once were, fighting to breathe amidst the chaos. And deep within her, a flicker of resolve ignited, a determination to reclaim what had been lost. Time slipped away, the past and the present merging into a blur, and as they stood in that warehouse, the boundaries of hope began to blur, setting the stage for a reckoning they could never have anticipated. The sirens wailed like banshees, cutting through the thick fog of the night. I stood on the crumbling balcony of what used to be a vibrant city, now a battlefield of shadows. Below, a sea of faces glistened with fear and desperation, their eyes wide, reflecting the chaos that had swept over us like a plague. The tension hung heavy in the air, palpable, as if even the wind dared not breathe. I remember the moment when Thomas, my old friend, turned to me, his hands shaking like leaves caught in a tempest. "This is it, isn't it?" he whispered, his voice barely piercing the cacophony of distant gunfire and the staccato beat of marching boots. The weight of his words settled in my chest, a leaden truth that I could not bear. I nodded, feeling the chill of inevitability grip my spine. We were caught in an unholy alliance of nations, a fragile tapestry woven from fear and ambition. People who once danced in the light of camaraderie now stood divided, drawn into the abyss of conflict. I thought of Naomi, the brilliant strategist whose heart burned with the fury of 1,000 suns. She had orchestrated this grand game, threading alliances like a master weaver, but now the very fabric of her creation was unraveling. I could see the cracks in her resolve, the haunted look in her eyes as she watched the world she had tried so hard to stabilize slip through her fingers like grains of sand. "Where's the hope?" I wanted to scream, but the words caught in my throat, stifled by the weight of reality. Her eyes met mine, a storm of emotion swirling within. "Hope is a luxury we can't afford anymore," she said, her voice barely a whisper, yet it reverberated within my soul like a battle cry. I felt the truth of it, the crushing despair of our situation. The clock was ticking, the world around us was collapsing, and each tick was a reminder of our impending doom. The lights flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced across the walls, whispering secrets of betrayal and lost trust. I thought of the leaders meeting in their gilded chambers, discussing strategies as if lives were mere chess pieces on a grand board. They spoke in languages foreign to my heart, cloaked in the guise of diplomacy while the streets below burned. The irony twisted inside me like a knife, each cut deeper than the last. "Do you remember that night?" Thomas suddenly asked, his voice a fragile thread in the tumult. I blinked, momentarily torn from the vortex of despair. "Which night?" I replied, though I knew. I was dragged back to a hazy memory of laughter under a starlit sky, when alliances were forged over bottles of wine and dreams of a brighter future. "The night we made our pact," he said, and I could feel the warmth of nostalgia flooding my veins, a bittersweet reminder of innocence lost. We thought we could change the world. Yes, I said, my voice trembling as I clung to that fleeting moment, but look at us now. The weight of disappointment hung between us like a heavy fog, thick enough to choke on. It was suffocating, this realization that the very ideals we held sacred were now twisted into weapons of war. Naomi's gaze flickered toward the horizon, where the first hints of dawn dared to break through the darkness, painting the sky in hues of desperation and determination. We can still fight, she asserted, her voice gaining strength, but doubt laced her words. We have to believe that these alliances can mean something again. I wanted to believe her, but the scars of betrayal ran deep. Each ally now felt like a ghost of trust, haunting us with their promises. And then it happened, a sudden eruption of violence, a clash of metal and flesh that sent a shockwave through the air. We rushed to the edge of the balcony, hearts pounding, the reality of our fragile existence slamming against us like a tidal wave. I watched as figures moved in the streets, the darkness swallowing them whole, while the light of hope flickered precariously in the distance. Thomas grabbed my arm. We can't stand by, we have to do something. The intensity in his eyes ignited a fire within me, and I felt the raw primal urge to act surge up my spine. But what could we do in a world so bent on destruction? Our cries for peace seemed like whispers drowned in the roar of war. As the sun crested the horizon, I couldn't help but feel a desperate longing for the past, a time when laughter and camaraderie echoed through the streets. The shadows of our former selves haunted us as we stood on the brink, the weight of our decisions heavy on our shoulders like a yoke that threatened to crush us. Naomi's voice broke through my reverie, urgent and fierce. We'll gather the remaining allies. We'll remind them of who they truly are. The fire in her words struck a chord, rekindling the tiniest flicker of hope within me, yet I couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. The world was a stage, and the performance was about to reach its climax, a crescendo of chaos, where loyalties would be tested, and lives would hang in the balance. Together, I said, finding strength in our shared resolve. Together, we can navigate this darkness. The words felt fragile yet powerful, a promise forged in the crucible of despair. And as we stepped back from the edge of the abyss, I knew that our choices would either illuminate the path to redemption or plunge us further into the depths of despair. But the journey had just begun. The tension crackled in the air like static, an electric pulse that whispered of confrontation and transformation, the threads of our lives intertwining in a tapestry of uncertainty. In that moment, I understood the haunting truth: we were bound together by more than mere alliances, we were woven into the very fabric of humanity itself. And as we ventured into the uncertainty, I felt the breath of the cosmos behind us, pushing us forward into the unknown. The night hung thick with fear, an unyielding silence broken only by the distant wail of a siren, echoing through the empty streets like a desperate plea for help that would never arrive. In that moment, I stood on the precipice of dread, a cold sweat trickling down my back, heart pounding against the cage of my ribs. The moon, a cruel observer, cast shadows that danced with an eerie life of their own, whispering secrets I dared not understand. I remember the way the asphalt glistened, slick and dark, reflecting the pale light as if the ground itself was a mirror to the madness unfolding above it. Lena, my sister, stood beside me, her eyes wide with terror that mirrored my own. She was always the brave one, the protector, but tonight, she was just as lost as I was. Her hands trembled, a small betrayal of her steely resolve, as she glanced toward the horizon where the city skyline loomed, jagged teeth against a starless sky, full of promises we once cherished but now felt like chains. "What if it's true?" she whispered, and in her voice, I heard a tremor that sliced through the heavy air. "What if they really are watching?" I remember the stories, the whispers that turned our lives into a waking nightmare. The government, faceless yet omnipresent, had taken everything we held dear, our freedom, our dignity, our safety. Each day, fear seeped deeper into the cracks of our existence, like poison slowly infiltrating our veins. They had perfected the art of psychological warfare, wielding it like a blade, cutting us down, turning us against each other. The news was a cacophony of despair, each broadcast another reminder of how fragile we had become, how easily they could shatter our world with a single, chilling announcement. Then there was Marcus, my childhood friend, who had become a spectre of his former self. I could see him through the window of the deserted cafe across the street, hunched over a flickering screen, his fingers dancing nervously over the keys as if typing could somehow rewrite our fate. His face, once vibrant and full of dreams, was now a mask of fear and resignation. He had always wanted to change the world, but now he was trapped in a cage of his own making, the bright flame of ambition extinguished by the gloom that hung over us. I caught his eye for a fleeting moment, a shared understanding passing between us, a silent acknowledgement of the chains that bound us. "Lena, we have to do something," I said, my voice barely a whisper, thick with desperation. "We can't let them control us like this." She turned to me, her expression a mixture of determination and dread. "And what do you propose?" "They've made it clear that dissent will not be tolerated." Her words hung in the air like a weight, heavy and suffocating. I remembered the faces of those who had vanished, swallowed by the shadows, mere whispers in the wind. They had spoken out, had dared to challenge the darkness, and now they were nothing but ghosts, their dreams silenced forever. But something inside me burned, a flicker of rebellion igniting in the depths of my soul. "We have to unite," I urged, the urgency crawling under my skin. "There are others who feel the same. We can't let fear drown us. We must fight back." Lena's gaze hardened, a glimmer of the sister I knew resurfacing through the fog of despair. "And what if it costs us everything? What if this fight only leads us deeper into the abyss?" Her voice trembled, but there was an undercurrent of resolve, a spark that could ignite the flames of resistance. As the sirens wailed closer, I felt the walls closing in, the oppressive weight of the regime pressing down on us like a suffocating shroud. I reached for her hand, my fingers intertwining with hers, grounding myself in the warmth of her skin. "We are stronger together. We have to believe that." The words were a mantra, an incantation against the encroaching darkness. Outside, the city held its breath, the tension thick enough to carve with a knife. In that moment, I closed my eyes and imagined a world beyond this horror. A moment where laughter echoed through streets, where dreams were not nightmares waiting to unfold. A world where the shadows were not the puppeteers of our fate, but mere witnesses to our resilience. But the truth was more insidious. Each heartbeat was like a countdown, the clock was ticking, and the stakes were rising. The government was not just an entity, it was a living, breathing monster, feeding on our fears, feeding on our silence. I could feel its presence, a ghostly hand tightening around my throat. Suddenly, the door of the cafe swung open, and Marcus stumbled out, his face pale, eyes wild. "They know," he gasped, and the world tilted on its axis. "They know we're planning something. We have to move, now." In that heartbeat, everything changed. The air crackled with urgency, the sirens shrieked like banshees. Lena and I exchanged a glance, the unspoken pact sealing our fate. We would not cower in the shadows any longer. We would not let fear rob us of our humanity, our right to fight for the light that still flickered in our hearts. As we fled into the night, the city around us transformed into a theater of chaos, the ground beneath our feet a battlefield. The ghosts of our past loomed large, and the fear that gripped our throats became a battle cry. In that moment, we were not just survivors, we were warriors, ready to reclaim our story from the hands of tyrants. And as the darkness curled around us, I felt the pulse of something greater than fear, a fierce, unyielding hope. It would not be easy, it would not be quick. But every step we took, every heartbeat, echoed with defiance. The revolution had begun, and the psychological warfare would no longer hold us captive. We would rise. The air hums with an unsettling tension, a stillness thick enough to choke on. Beneath the amber glow of flickering streetlights, a crowd gathers, their faces etched with fear and uncertainty. I stand among them, heart pounding, mind racing, a fractured mosaic of hopes and despair. The whispers of tight-lipped conversation swirl around me, fragments of dread that cling like cobwebs in the corners of a darkened room. I remember the moment we realized democracy was unraveling. It was here, in this very square, where the earth trembled with the weight of our collective heartbeat. Across the throng, I see Elena. Her eyes, vibrant pools of defiance, glimmer with a fire that refuses to be extinguished. She clutches a worn banner, "We are the people," scrawled in trembling letters, as if the very ink might ignite the courage hidden in our hearts. She had always believed in the power of the people, her laughter a balm for the wounds of the world. But now, raw anguish etches deeper lines across her brow, shadows gathering where once there was light. Her fear is palpable, a tangible thread connecting us in this shared nightmare. And there's Marcus, a son of the system, of dark suits and polished shoes, a smooth smile that now falters under the weight of revelation. He was once the golden boy, the politician with a silver tongue, dazzling us with dreams of progress. But here he stands, a ghost of the man he was, as the tides of tyranny wash over the shores of our freedom. I see him shift uncomfortably, his fingers brushing against the fabric of his suit, as if trying to find the power within that is slowly slipping away. The irony is thick, he helped build this crumbling edifice, yet now he is as lost as the rest of us. "Stay strong," Elena whispers, her breath a shiver against the night. "We can't let them take it from us." But I can feel the tremor in her voice, fear spilling over hope like ink on a page, uncontained, chaotic, irrevocable. She reaches for my hand, our fingers intertwining like ivy, desperate to cling to something solid in this sea of uncertainty. I want to believe her, believe in her unyielding spirit, but doubt seeps into my bones, heavy as lead. The clock tower tolls, echoing through the square, a chilling reminder of time slipping away. Each chime reverberates in my chest, marking the minutes until the inevitable confrontation arrives. I remember how we once laughed at the ticking clock, how we thought we had all the time in the world to shape our future. Now, each tick feels like an executioner's hammer, a signal that the hour of reckoning is drawing near. The night sky swirls with clouds, and for a moment, it feels like the universe itself is holding its breath, waiting for the chaos to erupt. Then, in an instant, it happens. The roar of a siren pierces the air, slicing through the murmurs like a dagger. The crowd shifts, a living organism reacting to a predator in their midst. Marcus straightens, his facade of confidence cracking like an old mirror as he stares into the distance, eyes wide with horror. A line of uniformed officers, shields glinting ominously under the streetlights, advances. They are the harbingers of a new order, and in their eyes, I see no empathy, no understanding of the lives they are about to trample. The crowd surges forward, a tidal wave of desperation and anger, and I feel the electric pulse of their collective heartbeat against my own. I remember the weight of our dreams, the visions of justice, equality, and progress that had filled our minds. But now, those dreams are unraveling in front of us, stripped bare by the cold grip of authoritarianism. Our cries for justice echo into the abyss, swallowed by the shadows that loom over us. "Hold the line!" Elena shouts, her voice rising above the cacophony. She stands tall, an unwavering beacon of hope amid the storm. I want to join her, to stand shoulder to shoulder against the encroaching darkness, but a paralyzing fear grips me. What if standing up means losing everything? I see the flicker of doubt in Marcus's eyes, a reflection of my own turmoil. He was a man of power, yet here we are, powerless against the tide of history. Together, we are strong, I murmur, but the words feel hollow, a brittle promise that the universe might shatter at any moment. I see the ghosts of our past, the hope that once flourished in this very square, the laughter that mingled with the stars. It feels like a distant memory, almost unreal, like vapor dissolving into the night. As the officers advance, the tension snaps like a taut wire. The silence shatters, replaced by chaos, a surge of bodies, the crunch of boots against pavement, the heart-stopping thud of shields clashing against desperation. I remember the sound of my own breath, quick and shallow, as if I'm drowning in this maelstrom of humanity. I want to run, but the weight of history holds me fast, binding me to this moment, to these people, to Elena and Marcus. And then, it happens, a flash of violence, a scream that pierces the air like a siren's call. I watch, horrified, as a figure crumples to the ground, a symbol of everything we are fighting against, everything we fear. The world spins, time stretching and contracting like a living entity, suffocating beneath the weight of our failures and dreams. "Keep fighting!" Elena screams, her voice a lifeline amid the chaos. The confrontation looms, a crescendo of emotion and fear, echoing in the shadows of a world that threatens to consume us whole. And I wonder, will we rise or will we fall? The answer hangs in the air, heavy and electric, a question lost in the chaos of the night. A siren wails in the distance, piercing the stillness of a starlit night. I stand in the shadows, heart hammering against my ribcage like a caged animal, alive yet ensnared. The city, once vibrant and full of hope, has morphed into a labyrinth of dread. I can taste the fear, metallic and bitter, in the air. It's suffocating. Every breath I take feels like a rebellion, a quiet act of defiance against the gravity of despair. I remember the chill of that autumn evening, how the leaves crunched underfoot, a symphony of whispers beneath our feet. We gathered in the square, bodies pressed close, warmth mixing with fervor, the surge of belief coursing through us. We were young, naive, and oh, so hungry for change. Alex stood beside me, his raven-black hair tousled like a wild flame, eyes bright and alive with dreams that danced just out of reach. "This time," he said, voice strong yet laced with an edge of uncertainty, "this time we can make them listen." But the memories of his conviction cling to me now like ghosts, haunting the silence of my resolve. Beside him was Jenna, a wildfire in human form, fierce and unyielding. Her laughter rang out, a melody against the oppressive weight of night. I remember her words, sharp and electric, "If we don't stand up, who will?" But standing up comes with a price, and as the siren fades into the distance, I feel that price looming over us like a dark cloud, ready to rain down retribution. It feels like we're racing against the clock, the hands ticking away our chances like a bomb ready to go off. I glance at Alex, his expression is a tumult of hope and despair. A moment of hesitation flits across his features, a mere fraction of a second, but it feels monumental. The uncertainty hangs heavy, like the weight of 1,000 unspoken fears. "What if they come for us?" he whispers, and my heart sinks. In this moment, the reality of our actions presses down on me, overwhelming and sharp. In that fleeting silence, I think back to the protests that spiraled into chaos, the faces of our friends turning pale as they faced the unforgiving wall of law enforcement. I remember the crack of a baton against flesh, the wild screams of a soul trapped in the grip of tyranny. And I remember the resolve, too, the moment they took one of us, a spark igniting a wildfire of dissent. Yet, even fire can consume its own. As we march forward, my hands grip the protest sign, splintering under the pressure. Each step is a heartbeat, a declaration, a commitment to the chaos swirling around us. Jenna shouts a rallying cry, her voice a battle hymn that sends shivers down my spine. I can see the fire in her eyes, the kind of flame that could light up the darkest corners of our hearts, yet could also burn us to ash. In the distance, shadows stretch ominously, figures clad in dark uniforms, a wall of authority poised to extinguish our light. We are the moths, drawn to the flame, and yet we cannot turn away. "Stay together!" I scream into the fray, the words tumbling out like prayers. But in this moment, I can feel the fracture, I can feel the fear gnawing at the edges of our resolve. Then it happens, a flash of light, a rush of adrenaline. The first shout erupts, piercing the air, and chaos unfolds, an avalanche crashing through the stillness. I glimpse Alex, his face twisted in determination, charging ahead as if to wrestle fate itself. My heart plunges, there is beauty in his defiance, but it is shrouded in terror. A scream echoes, distant yet close enough to feel the tremors in my bones. The rhythm of our protest morphs into something darker, something primal. The crowd surges, a tsunami of bodies, each person a thread in this tapestry of resistance. But who do we become when that tapestry unravels? I feel the weight of the moment pressing down, each heartbeat a countdown to an uncertain fate. I see Jenna's silhouette illuminated by the flickering street lamps, fierce and unbreakable, yet I sense the fear lurking beneath her bravado, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. Suddenly, the world narrows to a single, piercing moment, my breath hitching as I see it unfold before me. A figure, cloaked in authority, raising a baton, the air crackles with electricity, and time slows. I reach for Alex, our fingers barely brushing, and it feels like the universe is stretching between us. In that instant, we are all ghosts of what could have been, and I realize how fragile our dreams can be, how quickly they can shatter. "Run!" I scream, but the word is swallowed by the roar of chaos. I see Jenna, frozen, her eyes wide with disbelief, and I want to scream, to yank her back, to pull her from the edge of this abyss. But she stands there, caught in the storm, her spirit unyielding even as the shadows close in. The world erupts into a cacophony of shouts and shoving bodies, of pain and passion intertwined. My heart races, blood pounding in my ears as I struggle to make sense of it all. I feel the cold hand of dread wrap around my throat. Will this moment define us? Will it be the spark that ignites a revolution or the nail in our coffin? We are all prisoners of our own making, bound by dreams and fears, and I wonder if we'll ever truly break free. The sirens wail once more, but it feels distant now, a haunting refrain against the backdrop of our defiance. And in the chaos, amidst the flickering shadows, I catch a glimpse of hope, a flicker of resilience in the face of despair. This is only the beginning, the first tremors of a seismic shift. The night may be dark, but within it lies the promise of dawn, a reminder that even in our fiercest battles, we are never truly alone. The world may tremble, but we will stand, hearts intertwined, as the echoes of our resistance drown out the cries of tyranny. And so, we press on, unyielding, drawn together by the fire that refuses to die. The clock ticks like a heartbeat in the dim room, a relentless reminder that time waits for no one. Each tick is a hammer striking an anvil, forging the weight of decisions that hang heavy in the air. Outside, the world moves on, oblivious to the chaos brewing within these walls. My fingers tremble against the cold steel of the table, heart pounding like a war drum, echoing in my ears. I remember the moment everything shifted, the moment we realized, too late, that the truth was nothing but a mirage, a cruel joke whispered by the shadows. "Get down!" Lisa's voice cuts through the silence, sharp and piercing, as she grabs my arm, pulling me into the corner of the room. Her eyes are wide, filled with fear and fury, reflecting the chaos outside. I can still hear the screams, the shouts of men prepared to fight and die for a cause we knew had been built on lies. I remember the reports, the forecasts, and the confident proclamations that led us here. They had promised us safety, clarity. They had fed us illusions, and we, hungry for hope, devoured every word. We had trusted the intelligence. We had believed in the infallibility of those who should have known better. Now, as the smoke fills our lungs and the world crumbles around us, I feel the bitterness rise in my throat. What if they were wrong? I whisper, the question hanging in the air like a spectre. The weight of it crushes me, an unbearable truth we'd all been too afraid to acknowledge until it was far too late. Lisa's grip tightens, fingers digging into my skin like a lifeline. "They've always been wrong," she says, her voice trembling, blending anger and desperation. "We can't rely on them any longer." The truth stings, but it's a truth I know too well. I remember the rumors, the whispers in the dark, the moments where intuition screamed louder than reason. We should have listened. We should have trusted ourselves. "Where's Michael?" I ask, scanning the shadows for his familiar figure, each second stretching like an eternity. His absence is a gaping wound in our small circle, a reminder that fear has a way of tearing apart the bonds we hold dear. "He's out there," Lisa says, her voice breaking, eyes darting to the door. "We have to find him." I remember the way Michael laughed, how he could turn the bleakest of situations into something almost bearable. But that was before the lies piled up like debris, heavy and suffocating. Before the plans were drawn in blood, before trust became a weapon turned against us. His absence feels like an omen, a dark cloud looming over us, threatening to swallow us whole. The room vibrates with the sounds of conflict, a cacophony of chaos. Each explosion is a reminder of the cost of poor information, the lives lost because someone failed to connect the dots. I feel the walls closing in, memories swirling like ghosts in a storm. "We have to go. Now!" I shout, urgency lacing my words. Lisa nods, determination flashing in her eyes. She's always been the fierce one, the warrior with fire in her veins. But even she can't mask the flicker of doubt that dances behind her gaze. "What if we're walking into a trap?" she asks, and in that moment, I can see the shadows of her own past, a lifetime of choices made under the weight of misguided truths. "Better to face it than sit here waiting for it to come for us," I reply, hoping to ignite a spark of courage. We move, shadows slipping through shadows, hearts racing, blood pounding. Every door is a potential threat, every corner, a new danger waiting to spring upon us. I remember the abandoned streets, once vibrant with life but now haunted by echoes of destruction. They said the intelligence was clear: sweep the area, secure the perimeter. They didn't mention the ghosts that lingered, the uncertainty that wrapped itself around our throats like a noose. I catch a glimpse of Michael in the distance, a flicker of movement amidst the chaos. Relief floods through me, but it's quickly swallowed by a wave of terror. He's cornered, backed against a wall, surrounded by shadows that loom like hungry beasts. "Michael!" I scream, a desperate plea that pierces the din of destruction. His gaze meets mine, a moment suspended in time, and I can see the struggle in his eyes, the conflict of loyalty and survival, the burden of choices never made. "Help me," he yells, but the words feel like a shackle, binding him to the very fate we've been trying to escape. We charge toward him. I can sense the danger like a predator stalking its prey. Each step is a drumbeat of resolve, a rhythm fueled by fear and love. But as we push forward, the world shatters around us. Explosions bloom, and the sky is suddenly filled with smoke and fire. The air thickens, choked with despair. I remember the sweet scent of home, the laughter of loved ones, now replaced by the acrid tang of destruction. Lisa pulls me back, her eyes wide with realization, her heart racing like a caged bird. "We can't go any closer," she yells, but all I can hear is the echo of Michael's voice, a siren call pulling me into the abyss. Every instinct screams at me to save him, to reach out and drag him back from the edge. But we are tethered to the harsh truth of our situation, how intelligence, once a shield, had become a sword, slicing through our hopes and dreams. "Help me!" The desperation in his voice becomes a haunting mantra as the distance between us stretches impossibly wide. My heart shatters, each fragment slicing deeper than the last, as I realize we might lose him to the very failures that brought us here. And just like that, the world fractures, the moment suspended in a tapestry of despair. As the smoke swirls and shadows dance, I know this is only the beginning. A confrontation looms, a reckoning with the ghosts of our past. The cycle of intelligence failures has spun out of control, and we are caught in its relentless grip, desperately searching for a way to escape the nightmare we never saw coming. The air crackles with tension, a thick, suffocating fog that wraps around the city like a vice. A single gunshot shatters the night, echoing through the alleyways like a ghostly whisper. I freeze, heart pounding in my chest, the taste of iron on my tongue. I remember a time before the fear, when laughter rumbled through the streets and hope danced in the air, but that was before the shadows crept in, suffocating the light. "Lena!" The voice pierces the darkness, filled with panic and desperation. It belongs to Marco, my brother. I can picture him, eyes wide, the pulse at his throat racing like the heart of this city, alive yet dying simultaneously under the weight of unseen hands. I hear footsteps pounding, a symphony of chaos, as he rushes toward me, breathless, straining against the night. "Did you see them?" He grips my shoulder, desperation bleeding into his voice. "They came from the east, men in uniforms, eyes like stones, and they're hunting us." I shake my head, the truth sitting heavy in my stomach. I remember those sharp, blinding uniforms, slick with authority, like knives drawn against the fragile skin of our lives. They are the puppeteers, and we are the marionettes, strings pulled taut with fear that rustles like leaves in a storm. I want to scream, to run, but the weight of reality pins me down. "Lena, we need to go." He grips my arm tighter, urgency spilling from his being. Marco's loyalty is a double-edged sword, my protector, yet the anchor dragging me into the depths of despair. We both know it's not just the local militia that's hunting, it's something much bigger. Foreign forces crouching in the shadows, their influence seeping like poison into the veins of our homeland. I remember the day it all changed. The television flickered, images of leaders shaking hands across oceans, smiles so wide they could swallow the sun. Promises were made, but underneath them simmered a darkness, a deal struck in backrooms, where whispers turned to screams. I had watched the faces of those leaders, not realizing their smiles were painted with the blood of our freedoms. "Let's get to the safe house," Marco urges, and I nod, heart racing. We weave through the alleyways, shadows our only allies, the darkness echoing with distant shouts and sirens, a cacophony of despair. The city is alive with the ghosts of dreams, the memories of what was, and what could have been, crushed beneath the iron heel of oppression. But with every step, my mind drifts to Katia, our neighbor, a firebrand suffocated by dreams of revolution. I see her fierce eyes, a blaze that could light the world, but now dulled by the weight of betrayal. She had spoken out, rallied the people, only to watch as they turned their backs, swayed by the promises whispered by foreign tongues. I remember her laugh, defiant and wild, before they took her away, leaving behind only echoes of broken hope. "Did you see Katia?" I ask, my voice a mere whisper against the thrum of the night. Marco's face goes pale, the light in his eyes flickering. "They got her. The night she spoke at the square, they took her." A pause lingers like a ghost, heavy and mournful. "You have to understand, Lena, it's not just us anymore. This is bigger. They're here, watching, manipulating." My stomach churns, a storm brewing inside as dread seeps into my bones. I remember the whispers, those hushed conversations in the dark, foreign powers with their hands on our throats, pulling the strings of our despair, like puppeteers who feasted on the chaos they created. We were surrounded by invisible walls, built by foreign fingers, tightening every day. "Stop!" I shout, the cry tearing itself from my throat, raw and primal. "We can't let them win." But the words feel like ashes on my tongue, burnt offerings to gods who were never there. Marco halts, his eyes blazing with a fire that rivals my own. "What do you propose, Lena? We fight shadows? They have armies, resources." "They have, but I don't let him finish. I've seen what their resources can do, how they can turn a peaceful protest into a battlefield, how they can paint the streets red with the blood of the innocent, how they can manipulate the very fabric of our existence." Maybe Katia was right. The words slip out, heavy and laden with truth. Maybe we need to play their game. He freezes, the world around us fading into a whispering void. "You don't mean I do. We can't hide. We need to gather the people, wake them up. We need to remind them of who they are." But the weight of my own words crushes me. I remember the faces of those who had once stood beside Katia, now shrouded in fear, their dreams snuffed out like candles in a storm. I remember their silence, the way they turned away when the sirens blared, when the shadows grew longer. "Lena," Marco's tone is soft yet heavy, a warning wrapped in love. "They'll come for us, for anyone who dares to defy them." And I know he's right. But I also know that there is no other way. The foreign powers have sown discord and despair, feeding off our fear like vultures on a carcass, but we have to fight back, or we are lost. Then we draw them out, I whisper, my resolve hardening. We become the ghosts that haunt them. Marco stares into my eyes, searching for doubt, but all he finds is a flicker of hope, a fragile thing, like a spider's web glistening in the dawn. "Together then," he says, and the weight of that promise hangs between us, heavy with uncertainty and the taste of defiance. We take a breath, and in that moment, the cacophony of the city envelops us, the heartbeats of the lost echoing in our ears. We are not just victims anymore, we are the storm. But the clock is ticking, shadows are closing in, and the world watches, a silent, cruel audience, their delight hidden behind masks of power. The air thickens, and through the silence, I can almost hear the sneering laughter of those who pull the strings. And as we step deeper into the darkness, a sense of urgency presses down like a weight, but alongside it, a flicker of something unfamiliar, a spark of rebellion igniting in our chests. The game has begun. And we are ready to play. The night was thick and suffocating, a blanket of darkness draped over the city like a shroud. Sirens howled in the distance, piercing the silence that settled heavily over the streets. Each wail echoed a warning, a promise of chaos just beyond the horizon. Lydia stood at the window, her breath fogging the glass, heart thrumming widely in her chest as the world outside blazed with urgency. She felt it, the storm, the palpable tension threading itself through the air, wrapping around her like a noose. I remember when the streets were alive with laughter, she whispered to no one, her voice a fragile ghost against the cacophony. but laughter had been swallowed whole by shadows. Now, only the flickering neon lights seemed to pulse with life, mocking her solitude. She turned abruptly, eyes wild and searching, landing on Marco, who paced the room, fingers raking through his hair as if trying to claw sense from the chaos. "Lydia, we can't keep waiting," Marco's voice trembled, laced with urgency. "They'll come for us. We need to act." But act how? The weight of their decisions bore down on her, pressing her into the ground, darkening her soul with doubt. The ideology they had once embraced, unity, strength, the power of their beliefs, felt like a distant echo now, distorted and warped by fear. Marco's eyes glinted with a fierce intensity, the kind that ignited a fire within, yet she couldn't shake the icy grip of despair that clawed at her heart. "I remember the rallies," she said, her voice cracking. "The speeches that made us believe we could change the world. But look at us now. Look!" She gestured angrily toward the window, where shadows danced outside, vibrant yet foreboding. "Is this what we fought for?" A flicker of something passed through Marco's eyes. Guilt? Regret? She couldn't tell. But it shattered something inside her. What was ideology when it crumbled under the weight of reality? What did it matter if they believed in something greater when the very foundation of their world was eroding beneath them? The door slammed open, and in rushed Sarah, breathless, her cheeks flushed with the thrill of danger. "They're coming," she gasped, eyes wide with a frenzied light. "We can't let them take over. We can't let our vision die." "Vision?" Lydia spat, the word bitter on her tongue. "What vision? The one where we're hunted like rats? Where our beliefs mean nothing in the face of violence?" With every word, her voice rose, a crescendo of despair that threatened to drown them all. But Sarah stepped closer, determination radiating off her like heat from a fire. "No. We can't let fear win. We have to fight back, to rally our people. If we fall apart now, what's left of us? Ideology is all we have." Lydia felt the swell of emotion crash over her like waves against jagged rocks. Ideology. That fragile thread that tied them together, that made them believe they were part of something greater. Yet it felt so fragile, teetering on the brink of annihilation. "Do you remember the night we burned those flags?" Marco interjected, his voice raw and electric. "We were so sure, so alive. I felt invincible." "I remember," Lydia whispered, fear mingling with a longing that clawed at her insides. They were young, reckless, drunk on the power of their dreams. But that night, an act of defiance, had led them to this moment, this battle against an unseen enemy. "What did we become?" she cried, the question spiraling into the darkness, desperate for an answer. "We wanted to ignite change, to illuminate the corners of this world, not drown in it." But the ideology that once fueled their fire now seemed like a ghostly specter, haunting them, whispering doubts that crept into their hearts. Marco stepped closer, framing her face with trembling hands, his gaze penetrating and fierce. "We are still here, Lydia. We are still fighting. We are the architects of our reality." "Architects," she echoed, bitterness creeping in like a thief. "But we built it on sand. How can we stand firm when every wave threatens to sweep us away?" The room breathed, heavy with their unspoken fears, the very air crackling with unresolved tension. Outside, the sirens grew closer, the chaos encroaching like a dark tide. Shadows flickered at the edges of their vision, whispering promises of despair. They were all flawed, each carrying the weight of their choices, yet bound by something deeper than fear, their ideology, the legacy of their dreams. "I remember," Marco said, his voice like a fragile thread, "the hope we felt. The belief that we could create something better, something that would last beyond us. We're not just fighting for ourselves anymore," Sarah added, her voice steadying. "We're fighting for every soul that believes in the possibility of a brighter tomorrow. That's what binds us." Lydia's heartbeat thundered in her ears, a drum heralding their inevitable clash with fate. She looked into their eyes, searching for the flicker of shared conviction, the spark that could ignite rebellion. But fear lingered, a constant specter prowling their minds, whispering doubts that threatened to suffocate. Then let it be our strength, she finally breathed, a fragile determination sparking to life. Let this fear fuel our fire. If we fall, let us fall fighting for what we believe in. Outside, the sirens blared, a cacophony of chaos that clashed against their fragile resolve. They were standing on the precipice, teetering on the edge of everything they had worked for, holding onto an ideology that felt both like a lifeline and a noose. In that moment, beneath the weight of their fears and dreams, they became a tapestry of hopes and shadows, woven together by the threads of belief. The night pulsed with the echo of 1,000 unforgotten dreams, a heartbeat that surged through the darkness and poured into their souls, reminding them that ideology was not just a belief, it was the very essence of their fight, their unity in a world that sought to tear them apart. And as the first shadow broke through the door, they stood together, hearts racing, ready to face the storm. The air thickened with the stench of smoke and fear, a suffocating shroud that clung to the skin like a wet rag. In the distance, an explosion rattled the earth, a cruel reminder that every heartbeat could be the last. Clara crouched behind a crumbling wall, the jagged stones cold against her palm. She could hear the shouts of soldiers, see their shadows dancing in the flickering light of a nearby fire. But more than that, she could feel her own heart thrumming, a wild thing trapped beneath the weight of despair. "I can't keep doing this," she whispered into the night, though her words were swallowed by the chaos around her. "Why can't they see?" She thought of her brother, torn from their home like a leaf ripped from its branch. He wore his uniform with pride, but it was a pride that felt foreign to her, like a suit too big, hiding the boy she had known. She remembered the day he left, the way he had turned to her, eyes full of dreams and promises, and said, "I'll make you proud, Clara. I'll fight for us." But what did it mean to fight for them? Was it worth the blood spilled and the night spent shivering in fear? Was it worth the silence that followed the gunfire, the way it echoed through her heart like a funeral bell? And then there was Eleonora, her best friend, who had become a ghost of the girl she once was. "You have to understand," she had said, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and sorrow, "we need to support them. They are our men, our fathers, our brothers." But Clara could only shake her head, the taste of bitterness rising in her throat. There was no glory in war, only loss. Eleonora's hands were now stained with the remnants of duty, the fabric of her own dreams torn asunder under the weight of expectation. "What about us?" Clara pleaded, desperation creeping into her voice. "What about our fight?" "I remember," Eleonora had said, her eyes glossing over with memories that felt too distant to grasp. "I remember the laughter, the nights we spent dreaming of a different world. But now, they need us to be strong, to hold the home front." And so, they had forged a new path, one fraught with tension and conflict. Clara had taken to the factories, the clanging of machinery a cacophony that drowned out her thoughts. Each shift felt like a descent into madness, a dance with despair as she shaped metal into weapons, crafted hope into something tangible yet deadly. She could feel the eyes of men watching, judging, as if her very presence was an affront to their masculinity. They were the warriors, she was just a shadow in their light. But in that shadow, rebellion stirred. She found solace in whispered conversations with other women, their voices a tangled thread woven through the dark. "We are not just support," Clara would say as they huddled together in the corners of the factory, the air thick with sweat and determination. "We are the backbone of this movement. Without us, they cannot fight." The tension escalated, a pressure cooker ready to explode. Clara watched as the women around her began to transform, their hands growing calloused but their spirits igniting. They shared secrets of sabotage, plans to disrupt the very machinery they had been forced to operate. "What if we?" Eleonora had suggested one night, her voice scarcely above a whisper, each word laced with the thrill of danger. A plan took shape, a wildfire of hope igniting within them. "We'll show them," Clara vowed, her heart pounding with the thrill of rebellion. They began to work slower, to craft pieces that wouldn't fit, to subvert the very war they were meant to support. Each act of defiance was a dagger in the heart of the dictatorship, a testament to their resilience. But with every step forward, Clara felt the weight of fear creeping back in. The shadows were lengthening, and she could sense the eyes of the regime watching, waiting for a misstep. She wondered if Eleonora would still stand by her side if the time came to pay the price for their rebellion. Would their friendship endure the fire? Or would it burn, singed by the flames of fear and loyalty? Then came the night when the soldiers stormed the factory. Clara's heart raced, pounding against her ribs like a caged animal. She could hear their boots thundering against the cold concrete, the shouts merging into a single roar that shook her to her core. She turned to Eleonora, their eyes locking in a moment that felt like eternity. "Whatever happens, remember," Clara began, but the words fell away, lost in the chaos. Then the doors burst open. It was like the world had split in two, the noise of war screaming through the silence of their lives. Clara felt her breath hitch, the reality of their choices crashing down like a falling building. The soldiers surged forward, their uniforms glistening under the harsh light, and in that moment, Clara understood the fragility of their rebellion. Eleonora was swept away in the tide, her screams lost in the cacophony. Clara's heart shattered as she watched, helpless, as her friend was pulled from her grasp, the distance between them too great, the cost too high. "I remember," she thought, the memories of laughter ghosting through her mind. "I remember the dreams we shared." In the chaos, Clara stumbled back, her world spinning like a whirlpool, pulling her into its depths. She could almost see the hopes they had spun together unraveling, one thread at a time. And as she turned to run, she felt the shadows closing in, the weight of the regime pressing down on her. But she would not give in. She would rise from the ashes of betrayal and despair, her spirit unbroken. The night was dark, but within her burned the embers of hope, flickering defiantly against the encroaching shadows. And as she slipped into the darkness, she whispered a promise to the wind, a dream shared between her and Eleonora. "We will fight. We will be free." The echoes of their laughter lingered in the air, a haunting melody against the backdrop of war, a reminder that even in the darkest times, the light of rebellion could never be snuffed out. The clock struck midnight with a hollow clang that resonated through the cold, damp corridors of the castle. I stood there, heart racing, pressed against the stone wall, shadows licking at my feet like hungry wolves. The air was heavy with a tension so thick it felt like a shroud, wrapping around my body, suffocating but also intoxicating. I remember that night, the pale moonlight slicing through the narrow window, casting ghostly patterns on the floor, as if the past itself had come to haunt this moment. "Loyalty is a delusion," I'd once heard Templeton say, his voice dripping with disdain, a smirk twisting his lips. He was the kind of man who could make betrayal sound like a sweet serenade. A soldier loyal to our tyrant lord, yet every word from his mouth trembled with the thrill of treachery. He was handsome in a way that could only mask the rot beneath, a polished surface, the gleam of power reflected in his dark eyes, eyes that could flicker with affection one moment and chill like winter's breath the next. I remember the first time we met. The banquet hall, filled with laughter and clinking goblets, glimmering like a mirage. I stood there, a mere shadow, as he held court. Every woman's gaze fixated on him, every man's envy simmering just beneath the surface. Yet it was me who caught his attention. "You look like a rabbit caught in the fox's den," he had whispered, his breath brushing against my ear, a blend of danger and allure. I shivered then, an electric thrill darting through me. I longed for his approval, yet feared the darkness that came with it. I could hear footsteps approaching now, sharp and deliberate. The air thickened with dread, and I pressed my back harder against the cold stone, wishing to melt into the shadows. Whoever was coming would see the betrayal that had taken root in my heart, the gnawing fear that had become my relentless companion. I was supposed to be loyal, yet my thoughts were already straying down treacherous paths. "Is it true?" The voice was low, barely above a whisper, a woman's voice, full of resolve yet tinged with vulnerability. It was Ilara, my closest friend, the one person I thought I could trust. I turned, the flicker of a candle illuminating her pale features, eyes wide with fear. "Did you betray him?" Her words cut like glass. They hung in the air, each syllable laced with pain. I had no choice, I stammered, my voice trembling as if I were standing on the precipice of a cliff, peering down into a swirling abyss. The truth was a heavy stone in my throat. I had done what I thought was necessary, what was meant to protect us both. I had woven a web of lies, believing they would shield us from the inevitable. Protect us. Ilara's voice cracked, a fragile thing. Or protect yourself. The betrayal in her eyes was more cutting than any sword. I had seen her bravery, her unwavering loyalty to our cause, yet here I was, dragging her down with my cowardice. The wall between us, once a fortress of friendship, now crumbled into ruins. A ghost of guilt lingered as I thought of Marco, the man I had betrayed to save my own skin. He was a fierce warrior, loyal to our lord, but also to me. I had made my choice, and now I felt the icy grip of regret. I could still see him, eyes ablaze with conviction, standing at the edge of the battlefield, sword raised high. "We fight for freedom," he had shouted, his voice echoing through the chaos, his resolve a beacon among the darkness. And I had watched from the shadows, paralyzed by fear, and now I was the one stained by betrayal. "Why?" Ilara's voice trembled, her body swaying as if the weight of my actions had become too much. I could see it in her eyes, the flicker of disappointment, the shadow of fear that clung to her soul. "You have to tell him, you have to make it right." But how could I make it right? The choices I had made were like boulders, rolling down a mountainside, gathering speed and destruction. "It's too late," I croaked, the truth suffocating me, drowning me in despair. "I can't go back." A silence fell, thick and oppressive, broken only by the distant echoes of laughter from the great hall, a stark reminder of the world outside this fortress of dread. The party continued, oblivious to the storm raging within. The irony twisted in my gut. While I stood poised on the edge of ruin, they danced, blissfully ignorant of the chaos threatening to consume us all. "Templeton knows," Ilara whispered, her voice laced with a chilling realization. "He knows everything." The words hung in the air, a ticking clock that threatened to shatter our fragile peace. I felt a shiver crawl down my spine, a premonition that sent cold fingers wrapping around my heart. Templeton's loyalty was as malleable as the fog that hung outside. It could shift and twist, revealing a darkness that was impossible to foresee. In that moment, time fell away. I could feel the weight of destiny pressing down on my shoulders, the ghosts of my choices whispering in my ear, "You are trapped." I reached for Ilara, my friend, my confidant, but as our hands brushed, the bond we once shared felt fractured. I had become the monster in her story, the betrayer cloaked in uncertainty. "How do you choose?" I asked, my voice cracking, betraying the tumult inside. "When every decision pulls you further into shadows." She was silent, tears glistening in her eyes, each drop a reflection of the fractured trust between us, each one a reminder that loyalty was a thread, easily frayed but near impossible to repair. The footsteps grew louder, echoing like thunder against the stone walls, and in that dreadful moment, I knew we were not the only ones trapped in this web of betrayal. The castle was alive with secrets, whispers, and the shifting tides of loyalty wrapping around us like a noose. I turned to Ilara, desperation clawing at my throat. "We must prepare." Each word was a battle cry, a plea for survival in a world that threatened to devour us both. But as the door swung open, revealing the figure of Templeton, dark and imposing, my heart sank. I understood in that moment, loyalty and betrayal were not choices we made, but the breaths we took, the steps we took closer to the edge of oblivion. The confrontation was upon us, and with it, the fragile nature of our reality began to unravel, threads of loyalty and betrayal intertwining in an unbreakable knot, pulling us deeper into the darkness where no light could escape. The battle for our lives was only just beginning. The echoes of distant explosions vibrated through the air, a haunting symphony of chaos, as I crouched behind the crumbling stone wall. The smell of gunpowder stung my nostrils, a bitter reminder that peace was a fleeting dream, war was the violent reality. I could hear my heart hammering against my ribcage, a frantic drumbeat that matched the rhythm of chaos unfolding just beyond my fragile refuge. "Hold it together, Leo," I murmured, the words barely escaping my lips, swallowed by the roar outside. I glanced over at Mara, her eyes wide with terror, reflecting the flickering shadows of flames licking at the sky. She was once a sister to me, the laughter we shared now a distant memory, replaced by shared glances that spoke of unspoken horrors. I remembered her smile, the way it could light up even the darkest corners of our battered world. Now, she was a ghost of that girl, her innocence buried under layers of trauma, a shell of who she used to be. Do you think we'll make it? She whispered, her voice trembling like the fragile ground beneath us. The question hung in the air, heavy and suffocating, as if the universe held its breath. I wanted to reassure her, to tell her that we would walk away from this hell, but the truth clawed at my throat, choking the words into unspeakable silence. I was a coward, afraid even of my own thoughts. Adrian was closest to us, a once boisterous soul now reduced to a stoic warrior. His hands trembled slightly as he clutched his rifle, every crack of gunfire sending jolts through his body. I remembered the boy who would tell stories as grand as the cosmos, weaving dreams of a future where war was a mere footnote in our history, rather than the only chapter. Now, his dreams were ghosts, whispers of what could have been, drowned in the cacophony of exploding shells. "Stay low," he muttered, his voice a gravelly whisper that barely rose above the din. "We can't afford to be seen." His eyes, once warm with mischief, now burned with a desperation that made my heart ache. I could see the lines of fear etched across his brow, the burden of survival weighing heavily on his shoulders. As the world outside erupted into chaos, my mind flickered to memories of calm. The stars flickering like candles in the night sky, a time when we would gaze upwards, dreaming of adventures that felt just out of reach. I remember the way we laughed, the warmth of friendship, the promise of tomorrow. But promises weren't worth much in a world where each second felt like a countdown to oblivion. With every explosion, another piece of my hope shattered. I could feel despair creeping like a cold shadow over my spine. Mara's hand brushed against mine, a spark of warmth in the freezing grip of fear. "Leo," she said softly, her eyes pleading. "What if we die here?" The question hung heavy in the air. I wanted to shout that we would fight, that we would not let this dark hell swallow us whole. But the weight of her question pressed down like a stone, and I could only nod, the movement a fragile acknowledgement of the uncertainty that loomed ahead. Adrian's breath quickened, his muscles coiling tight as if poised to spring. "We need a plan," he said, eyes darting around, scanning the battlefield beyond our makeshift sanctuary. The shadows danced ominously, taunting us with the inevitability of war. "We can't just sit here. We need to survive." Survive. The word echoed in my mind, a mantra of desperation. But what did survival mean when the world had turned to ash, when betrayal and loss hung heavy like a shroud? I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear the darkness apart with my bare hands. But silence enveloped me, a suffocating blanket that made my heart race even faster. Mara's finger traced the contours of a shattered stone, her lips moving in a silent prayer. I was losing her, losing us. I could feel the fissures widening, the gaping maw of despair threatening to swallow us whole. "We have to find a way out," I said finally, my voice barely a whisper against the rising tide of chaos. "We have to fight." But what was a fight without hope? What was a battle without a cause? Every step felt like a betrayal of all that we had lost, a surrender to the inevitable horrors wrought by war. My resolve wavered, I could feel the darkness creeping closer, wrapping around my throat like a noose. "Do you remember the old oak tree?" Mara's voice broke through my spiraling thoughts, a fragile thread connecting us to the remnants of a happier time. "The one by the river where we carved our initials." I nodded, the memory flooding back like a warm embrace. I could almost smell the earth, the sunlight filtering through the leaves, a sanctuary away from the looming spectre of war. "I remember," I whispered, my heart aching for that simplicity. Adrian shifted beside us, his eyes glinting with a fierce determination. "We can't let them take that from us. We have to fight for our memories, for our future." The fire in his voice ignited something deep within my chest, a flicker of defiance against the tide of despair. And then it hit me like a wave crashing against the shore. We were not just soldiers in a battlefield, we were warriors of memory, defenders of all that we held dear. I could feel it stirring, a fire igniting deep within me, rising against the encroaching darkness. "Together," I said, a clarity settling over my heart like a warm blanket against the bitter chill of uncertainty. "We fight together." The ground shook beneath our feet, a reminder that the battle was far from over. But in that moment, amidst the chaos and turmoil, we found a spark of hope. We would face the inevitable, hand in hand, hearts beating as one. The world may have crumbled around us, but we were alive. We were still here. And as the night deepened, shrouding us in shadows, that flame burned brighter. Time stretched, an endless loop of existence, where the past whispered promises of resilience and the future hung heavy with possibility. The stars above flickered, a silent chorus cheering us on as we prepared to step into the fray, a heartbeat away from the edge of oblivion. The phone buzzed on the table, a tremor in the stillness of the room. I stared at it, as if it were a rattlesnake poised to strike. My heart raced, pounding in my chest like a caged beast desperate for freedom. The screen glowed ominously in the dim light, a whispered invitation to something dark and dangerous. I thought of Sarah, my sister, her laughter echoing in my mind, a haunting melody that intertwined with the dread creeping into my thoughts. "Don't answer it." The voice in my head was stern but tinged with fear. It was the same voice that had warned me countless times before, as I tiptoed through a world that had become increasingly shadowy, where trust was a relic of the past, and every connection felt like a wire strung too taut. But curiosity gnawed at me, a relentless tide washing over the rocks of my resolve. I reached for the phone, fingers trembling, and the moment I picked it up, the static of 1,000 unsaid words crackled through the air. I felt it in my bones, a shift in the atmosphere, a prelude to chaos. I remember the last time I had felt this way, back when we believed technology was a tool for communication, not a weapon of betrayal. Michael, the voice on the other end, was familiar yet alien, coated in layers of urgency. "It's happening. We have to move. Now." My breath hitched. It was Alex, my best friend, my accomplice in this world of blurred lines and double agents. But there was something in his tone, a tremor that spoke of desperation, that made the air feel thick and heavy. "What do you mean? What's going on? Just listen. They've been tracking us. I don't know how long, but can you meet me?" I looked at the clock. Time had morphed into a monster, dragging me deeper into a labyrinth of uncertainty. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. "Where?" "Old Town, the clock tower. 18 minutes. The line went dead. Silence, so thick it pressed against my ears. I dropped the phone back on the table, my mind racing. The clock was ticking, each second a chisel, carving away my calm and replacing it with a gnawing fear. I remembered Sarah, her absence felt like a dark cloud hovering just above my head. She had been the light, the one who kept me grounded in this chaotic world. But now, it was as if her laughter was swallowed by the encroaching shadows. I stumbled toward the door, the weight of my decision heavy against my chest. What if I walked into a trap? What if this was the end? But beneath the fear, a flicker of something else ignited, anger. Anger at the world that had turned us into ghosts, always watching, never truly seen. A world where every message could be intercepted, every conversation spied upon. We were not just players on a stage, we were prey, hunted under the flickering lights of 1,000 screens. As I stepped outside, the night enveloped me like a shroud, the cool air biting against my skin. The streets were empty, the silence almost deafening, broken only by the distant hum of machinery, machines that listened, machines that watched. Shadows danced along the walls, their elongated forms twisting like the memories that haunted my thoughts. I remembered the headlines, the stories of people disappearing, erased like old text on a page. When I arrived at the clock tower, my heart raced. Alex was already there, his silhouette sharp against the moonlight. He looked up at me, his eyes wild, betraying a fear that mirrored my own. "You made it." I didn't know if, I felt the urgency pulse through me, the need to keep our words cloaked in secrecy. "What's going on?" "They have something on us, Michael. Something that can change everything." He paused, swallowing hard, his gaze darting around as if the shadows themselves were spies. "I hacked into their system. They've been monitoring our communications for months." A chill crept down my spine. "What do you mean? What do they have?" He pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket, handing it to me like it was a death sentence. My heart sank as I read the words, names, dates, encrypted codes. Each line was a dagger, piercing through my hope. I stared at it, lost in the implications. We weren't just victims, we were pawns in a game much larger than ourselves. I remember when we thought we were invincible, I murmured, memories flooding back, days spent laughing, dreaming, planning for a future that now felt like a mirage. We thought this technology would bring us closer. Alex nodded, his expression hardening. And now it's tearing us apart. We're just data points to them, manipulated and discarded. The clock tower loomed above us, its hands racing mercilessly toward midnight, a countdown to an unknown fate. The air was thick with tension, as if the world itself held its breath, waiting for the inevitable. I could almost feel the weight of eyes upon us, the unseen watchers lurking in the dark corners of the city, their intentions as cold and merciless as steel. "Michael, we need to find a way out," Alex said, desperation bleeding into his voice. "Before it's too late." But I hesitated, the enormity of our situation crashing over me like waves against the shore. And what if we can't? What if this is the end? Fear flickered in his eyes, but before he could respond, the echo of footsteps echoed through the alleyway, sharp and urgent. My breath caught in my throat. We weren't alone. I felt an overwhelming urge to flee, to run, but fear rooted me to the spot. The shadows merged, forming shapes that approached with a predatory grace. "Go!" I shouted at Alex, adrenaline surging through me. But as I turned to flee, a hand clamped down on my shoulder, a grip like iron, freezing me in place. The darkness had seeped into our lives, chaining us to uncertainty, and as we were pulled into the depths of our own making, I remembered Sarah, her laughter now a distant echo, lost in a world that no longer felt like home. The technology that connected us had turned into a noose, tightening with every heartbeat, every breath. And as they closed in, the line between friend and foe blurred, leaving us gasping in the shadows of a world where trust had become a luxury we could no longer afford. The air was thick with an oppressive stillness, as if the world held its breath. I stood in the shadow of the towering walls of the palace, the very heart of a regime built on terror. The sound of distant shouts, muffled cries, echoed like a haunting melody through the alleyways, seeping into the cracks of my consciousness. I remember the smell, smoke, fear, the metallic tang of blood. It clung to everything, to me. And there it was, the moment that would shatter everything I thought I knew. Lena crouched behind a crumbling wall, her eyes wide, glistening with unshed tears. She clutched her brother's hand as if it were a lifeline, the only thing tethering her to this world. "They'll come for us, won't they?" she whispered, each word a fragile breath. Her voice trembled like a leaf caught in a storm, her innocence suffocated under the weight of their reality. I wanted to tell her it would be okay, that we could run, we could escape, but the truth hung heavier than the smoke. Across the alley, a shadow moved. It was Ivan, a man consumed by rage yet burdened by guilt, a soldier caught in the machinery of a brutal regime. He was no monster, but neither was he a hero. We had grown up together, laughing, dreaming, but now he was a part of the nightmare. I could see it in his eyes, the desperation clawing at his soul, the conflict tearing him apart. He had taken an oath, sworn loyalty to a dictator who promised safety but delivered only chaos. He was both protector and jailer, and that paradox haunted him like a ghost. I remember the day we pledged our lives," he murmured to himself, his breath hitching. "We were so naive." The word slipped through his lips, raw and jagged. The irony was suffocating. We had wanted to change the world, but the world had changed us. A flash of light, a gunshot. Lena's grip tightened. I felt it, an electric jolt of fear coursing through my veins. Ivan's face hardened, he turned away, a part of him wanting to fight, another part longing to escape. How could one man bear the burden of so many lives? I wanted to scream at him, to demand he choose a side. But what did I know of courage? I was just a bystander in this horror. "What are you doing?" I called out, my voice echoing strangely in the silence. It felt like a betrayal to break the stillness, but I needed him to hear me. He turned, the struggle etched into his features. "I'm trying to survive," he replied, each word heavy with regret. "But survival comes at a cost. Do you understand? It's not just my life anymore. His gaze shifted to Lena, and I knew he felt the weight of her innocence, a mirror reflecting all that was lost. They were children of a broken dream, and what remained was a landscape littered with the shards of hope. With a deafening roar, a truck barreled down the street, its tires screeching against cobblestones, a beast hungry for blood. It was a reminder of the regime's iron grip, a constant presence that crushed the spirit of a once vibrant nation. I could feel the tremors underfoot, as if the earth itself trembled in fear. "Run!" I shouted, urgency flooding my voice. But where could we run? The walls were closing in, a labyrinth of despair. I looked at Lena, her small form trembling, and I felt a wave of rage wash over me. How could we live in a world where children were forced to bear the scars of tyranny? Ivan hesitated, torn between loyalty to his comrades and the plea of his childhood friends. The clock was ticking, counting down the moments of our existence, the weight of choices pressing down like a vice. "I can't leave," he whispered, a plea to the air. "If I run, it will be them next." Those words pierced me like a dagger. I thought of the families, the lives shattered beneath this regime's heel. Each decision had a face, a story, and it was becoming impossible to separate right from wrong. "But if you stay, you become part of it," I shot back, desperation sharpening my voice. "You become the monster." His eyes blazed, a fire igniting in the depths of his soul. "And what do you propose? That we just walk away? Forget everything?" "No. I want us to fight." "But fight against what? The shadows that loomed overhead? The ghosts of lost innocence?" The truth hung between us, thick and suffocating. I could see the flicker of hope in Ivan's eyes as he glanced at Lena, the girl whose laughter once filled these streets. Could we really take back what was stolen? The truck slowed, the sound of boots hitting the ground grew louder, soldiers, ready to extinguish the last flicker of defiance. The dark spectacle of power loomed before us, a reminder of the human cost of dictatorial rule. Each footfall marked a step closer to the end, a memento mori that reverberated through the air like a funeral dirge. I remember the clench of my fists, the surge of adrenaline as I looked at my friends, my family. "We have to choose," I implored, my voice barely a whisper. "We can't let them take us. Not now, not ever." The moment stretched into eternity, between fear and hope, loyalty and betrayal. The air crackled with the tension of unmade decisions. I could see it in Ivan's clenched jaw, in Lena's wide eyes, and in the shadows that danced around us. The choice was ours, and it was a choice that would define us forever. As the soldiers moved closer, I felt a shift deep within me, a rippling current that surged and clawed its way to the surface. In that moment, we were not just survivors, we were warriors, caught in a web of dreams and nightmares, ready to fight for what little light remained in this world. The confrontation loomed ahead, each heartbeat echoing the inevitability of our fate, a fate intertwined with the countless lives that had come before us and the unspoken promise of those yet to come. And as darkness descended around us, we stood at the precipice, waiting for the inevitable clash, knowing full well there was no turning back, no safe passage through the storm that raged within and without. This was the human cost of dictatorial rule, a price paid in blood, tears, and the shattering of dreams. One choice, one moment, and the world could explode into chaos or ignite into revolution. The weight of history was upon us, the future trembled, holding its breath as we stood on the edge of something vast and unfathomable. The air is thick, suffocating, as a mob surges through the streets, a restless tide of desperate souls seeking something they can no longer name. The sound of their footsteps echoes against the crumbling walls of a once mighty palace, a throne now reduced to a crumbling edifice looming over its own decay. Even the shadows seem to tremble, as if anticipating the violent upheaval, the blooded reckoning that is about to unfold. I stand here, heart racing, pulse quickening, a witness to the feral emotion radiating from the crowd, an energy that pulses through the air like an electric storm. In the chaos, I see Rosa, a fierce woman, fire in her heart, rage in her eyes. She clutches a tattered banner, its colors faded like the memories of hope that once adorned this city. She remembers the time when laughter echoed in these streets, when dreams danced in the twilight, innocent and full of promise. Now, her laughter is a ghost, lost in the wind. The dictator's face, chiseled into the very architecture of her despair, looms large in her memory, a constant reminder of the pain that has become her shadow. She steps forward, each movement a challenge, a drumbeat of defiance against the oppression that clings to her throat like a noose. Then there's Javier, leaning against a wall, lost in his thoughts, gaze distant. He had once believed in the dictator, once thought the man could bring order, prosperity. The wretched irony is palpable. He remembers the speeches, overflowing with promises, laced with the sweet nectar of ambition. But ambition has turned sour, and the air is thick with betrayal. Javier's hands tremble, feeling the weight of his own complicity, of the choices that led him here. He wants to scream, to tear the man apart piece by piece, but he is paralyzed by a question that gnaws at him: what if it's too late? I remember the night of the parade, bright lights and blaring music, the dictator waving like a god. The entire city was a carnival, a masquerade that masked the truth, the despair lurking beneath. But the masks are coming off now, revealing the raw faces of the broken. The crowd swells, a living, breathing entity, their collective fury a palpable storm. They chant, voices rising, each syllable a hammer striking against the steel of oppression. It's beautiful and terrifying, a symphony of chaos, heartbeat sinking to the rhythm of rebellion. Rosa stands tall, the banner held like a sword against the encroaching darkness. She is the embodiment of 1,000 souls, each one etched into her skin, and she knows that today, the ground beneath them will tremble. She sees Javier, and for a moment, their eyes lock, 2 lives, 2 stories, spun together by the unbreakable thread of suffering. A flicker of understanding passes between them, a silent language that speaks of shared anguish and unquenched aspirations. The moment hangs heavy, and then the first stone flies. It cuts through the air like a comet, igniting the crowd into a frenzy, a heartbeat of fury that shakes the foundations of the palace. I feel the collective breath, the intake of fear and elation, as if the world is suspended in time, teetering on the edge of something monumental. Rosa launches forward, a fierce cry erupting from her throat, a battle cry of the damned. It is a sound that reverberates through the very bones of history, a rallying call for those who have lost everything and yet possess the audacity to dream. Javier moves, compelled by an unseen force, the shame of inaction burning through him. He joins Rosa at the front lines, their resolve merging into a singular purpose. Together, they become a living manifestation of resistance, their voices rising above the chaos. Every shout, every scream, is a dagger aimed at the heart of tyranny. The air is electric, crackling with the tension of lives on the brink of transformation. But shadows linger in the corners of the square, grim reminders of the past that threaten to swallow them whole. I see the soldiers, faces hardened, eyes devoid of humanity, and I remember the stories of betrayal that whisper through the cracks of the city. I remember the families torn apart, the children who vanished into the night, swallowed by the regime's insatiable hunger. They are ghosts, specters of pain that refuse to be silenced, and the air grows thick with their sorrow. Rosa's heart races, and in that moment, she is no longer just a woman, she is a multitude of voices, each one demanding justice. She feels the weight of every lost life pressing on her shoulders. "This is for you," she shouts, tears streaming down her face, mingling with the dust of the ground beneath her feet. "This is for all of us." And Javier, standing shoulder to shoulder with her, feels the pulse of the crowd, feels his own heartbeat synchronize with the rhythm of hope and despair. The sky darkens, clouds rolling in, as if the universe itself is holding its breath. The soldiers advance, weapons drawn, and I can feel the weight of fear creep in, a chill that wraps around my spine. But there is no retreat, no going back. The decision hangs in the air, thick as smoke. Rosa's voice rings out, "Today, we fight." And then the confrontation explodes. It is chaos, a whirlwind of bodies, an ocean of emotion crashing against the shores of tyranny. I hear the clash of metal, the cries of the wounded, but above it all, I hear the laughter of freedom, echoing in the hearts of the brave. The line between despair and hope blurs, and the city itself seems to breathe, alive with the spirit of rebellion. But shadows still loom, reminding me of the fragility of this moment. The dictator watches from his perch, a cold smile etched on his lips, a puppet master pulling the strings of lives caught in his grotesque performance. There is no honor in this, only the specter of violence, the lurking fear of retaliation. I see it all, the anger, the hope, the unyielding spirit. I feel the weight of their stories, blending into an unending narrative that stretches back through the annals of time. The ground beneath me shakes, and with every heartbeat, I am reminded, they are not just fighting for a moment, they are fighting for a future, a chance to reclaim their voices from the abyss. As the confrontation reaches its fever pitch, the air thick with adrenaline and despair, I know that the story does not end here. It is a mosaic of broken dreams stitched together by the relentless pursuit of freedom, a testament to the power of the human spirit against the relentless tide of oppression. The shadows may threaten to swallow them whole, but as long as there is life, there is hope. And in that fragile flicker, the fight continues, an endless cycle of resistance and resilience, echoing through the corridors of time. The clock struck midnight, its chime echoing through the empty streets like the final toll of a bell in a desolate town. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and fear, a palpable tension hanging like a shroud over the city. Shadows danced on the walls, twisting and contorting as if alive, whispering secrets no one dared to acknowledge. In a small apartment, a flickering candle illuminated two faces, taut with anxiety, their eyes reflecting the weight of 1,000 unsaid words. I remember the moment clearly, James, his hands trembling as he turned the page of a worn notebook, ink smeared by his sweat-soaked palms. It was a record of resistance, a manifesto of dreams drowned in the reality of oppression. "If we don't act now, we'll be ghosts in our own lives," he said, a desperate plea that hung in the air, thick and suffocating. His voice cracked, revealing a vulnerability that shredded the armor of bravado he often wore. Then there was Lena, her spirit a fragile flame encased in uncertainty, eyes shimmering with tears she refused to shed. She had watched her brother disappear into the night, a victim of the regime's iron grip, a haunting reminder of what could happen, what had happened, to anyone who dared to speak out. "What if they come for us next?" she whispered, a tremor betraying the calm she fought so hard to maintain. In that moment, I felt the chill of history wrapping around us, a reminder of every soul lost to tyranny, their voices swallowed by silence, their stories reduced to dust. "Remember what they did to the ones before us, executed in the shadows," their cries echoing through history like a dirge, James said, clenching his fists, knuckles white with fury. "We cannot let them erase us." I could see the fire in his eyes, but there was also fear, a raw, visceral fear that gripped him, a fear I felt too. It was the weight of choices, of paths to be taken, and the dark abyss of despair lurking at every turn. We stood at the precipice of a decision, the cosmos swirling above us, indifferent to our plight. Time felt distorted, stretching like a rubber band ready to snap. I could sense the ghosts of the past swirling around us, a frantic whisper of revolutions, of lives snuffed out like candles in the wind. The lessons of history bore down upon us, heavy and unyielding, as if the echoes of the oppressed were urging us to take a stand, to make our voices heard. "Do you think they care?" Lena's voice was soft, almost a plea. "They'll paint us as traitors, as nothing more than pests to be crushed." She brought her hands to her face, a mask of anguish, embodying the weight of the world on her shoulders. I wanted to reassure her, to promise that we could fight, but the truth clawed at my throat, a bitter taste that left me gasping for air. In that moment, I realized how history has a way of repeating itself, how the cycle of authoritarianism weaves through time, each generation grappling with its own demons. Outside, the world was quiet, but the silence was deceptive. I could almost hear the distant drumbeats of an approaching storm, a reckoning that loomed just beyond the horizon. We were teetering on the edge, the abyss of complacency yawning before us, swallowing hope like a ravenous beast. "We must remember," James urged, his voice a low growl, filled with raw emotion. "The face of the past is a mirror to our future." I remember the first time I saw the photographs, the faces of the disappeared, their smiles frozen in time, a stark contrast to the shadows that consumed them. Each image was a story untold, each gaze a haunting reminder of the fragility of freedom. They haunt me still, their eyes pleading for justice, for recognition, for a chance to be remembered. "We are not alone in this fight," I whispered, not sure if I was trying to convince them or myself. Yet the weight of despair threatened to crush us. Lena stood, her silhouette trembling but resolute against the dim light, a warrior forged in the flames of her brother's absence. "If we're to rise, we must rise together," she declared, her voice gaining strength, a rallying cry that rippled through the air like electricity. It was a moment of clarity, a spark that ignited the room, and I felt the pulse of history quickening, the lessons of the past surging forth like a tide. I could see the resolve hardening in James' eyes, a flicker of rebellion igniting within him. "Then we fight," he said, his voice steady now, echoing with the certainty of all those who had come before us, the ones who had braved the storm, who had clawed their way through the darkness, refusing to be silenced. "We will not be ghosts. We will scream until our voices become thunder." And just like that, the air shifted. The shadows that had once felt like chains now transformed into a cloak of possibility. It was a heady rush, the intoxicating hope of youth mingling with the weight of history. We were teetering on the brink of something monumental, hearts racing in unison as if the very cosmos had aligned in our favor. But the specter of authoritarianism loomed large, a reminder that the fight would not be easy. It was a battle against an unseen enemy, the oppressive weight of a regime that suffocated dissent with brutal efficiency. We would face the ghosts of history, the lessons of the past ringing in our ears like a mantra, a reminder of what we must not forget. As the candle flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced on the walls, I realized that the fight against tyranny was not merely a struggle for freedom but a battle for our very souls. The night felt alive, charged with the energy of all those who had come before us, their voices woven into the fabric of our existence, urging us forward into the unknown. I remember the faces, the stories, the sacrifices. "We will remember," I whispered, unwilling to let the weight of our collective history extinguish the flicker of hope within us. Together, we would rise, no longer shadows, but warriors, ready to write our own narrative in the annals of time, with echoes of the past guiding our way. And as we prepared to step into the storm, the cosmos spun above us, indifferent yet infinitely connected, a tapestry of humanity woven together by the fibers of struggle, resistance, and the unyielding quest for freedom. This was only the beginning, a promise to ourselves and to those who had come before. A lesson learned, a story waiting to unfold. The air is thick, heavy with an unshakable dread, as I stand in the shadow of a crumbling building, the echoes of war reverberating through time, a ghostly reminder of what once was. The sun hangs low, casting long shadows that twist and shudder like lost souls trying to escape the weight of their memories. I remember the faces, the children with eyes full of hope, the soldiers hardened by the ravages of conflict, the leaders swathed in power, believing they were untouchable, gods among mortals. Yet, all around me, the whispers of their legacies linger, like a haunting melody that fills the silence with an unsettling urgency. There's Anya, her hands trembling, clutching a faded photograph of her father, a soldier who fought valiantly under the iron grip of a dictator. She stands at the edge of a forgotten battlefield, the earth still scarred, as if the land itself remembers the pain. "I wish I could tell him I understand," she murmurs, her voice a fragile thread woven into the tapestry of history. "He thought he was fighting for something greater, but what did it cost?" The question hangs heavy, a dark cloud obscuring the sun, reflecting the turmoil in her heart. I feel her agony, a visceral ache, and I remember. I remember how it felt to be torn between the ideals of loyalty and the haunting reality of sacrifice. And then there's Lucas, whose laughter once rang out like music in the streets, now silenced by the harsh realities of oppression. He stares at the empty square where a statue once loomed, a monument to a tyrant who promised prosperity but delivered despair. "What do you do when your country becomes a prison?" he asks, his voice raw, a tremor of anger threading through his words. "Do you bow down, or do you fight back, knowing the odds are stacked against you?" I feel the weight of his question seep into my bones, the fear of losing everything gnawing at his soul. It echoes in me, reminding me of my own struggles against the chains of conformity. The city pulsates around us, a heartbeat that quickens with every passing moment, the streets filled with whispers of rebellion and the shadows of a generation grappling with the ghosts of their past. I see glimmers of hope, a mural of a woman with fiery eyes, defiant against the backdrop of crumbling concrete. "We are not our dictators," Anya says fiercely, her voice rising above the din, igniting something deep inside me. "We can choose to rise, to change the narrative." The words crash like waves, fierce and relentless. But fear lurks, too, wrapped around us like a shroud. I remember the crack of a gunshot piercing the night, the screams that echoed through alleys, the the midnight raids that stole innocence and replaced it with despair. The legacy of those who wielded power without mercy lingers here, in the cracks of the pavement and the corners of each building, a reminder of how swiftly freedom can be snatched away. It's a cold truth that sends shivers down my spine. Lucas clenches his fists, every muscle in his body taut with the weight of fury. "What do we leave behind?" he shouts, and I feel the urgency of his desperation coursing through my veins. What kind of world are we building if we let the past dictate our future? I remember the stories of concentration camps, the chilling fear that kept people awake at night. History is not merely a story, it's alive, woven into our fabric, and the ghosts of the past seep through the cracks of our present. Anya's eyes glisten with unshed tears, the reflection of a broken world shimmering in her gaze. "I want to remember," she whispers, a plea that cuts deep. To honor those who suffered, to fight against the silence. The weight of her resolve resonates within me. It ignites a fire I didn't know I had, a burning desire to confront the shadows and scream against the darkness that threatens to swallow us whole. Time stretches, each second a testament to the struggle between hope and despair. The sky darkens, and the streetlights flicker on, illuminating the paths we walk, the choices we must make. Together, we stand, shivering in the cold twilight, the echoes of dictators long gone still reverberating through our hearts. We are the torchbearers, the keepers of memories that refuse to fade, and we must navigate this labyrinth of emotions, understanding that freedom is fragile, a butterfly in the storm. I feel the pulse of history in my veins, a reminder that we are never truly free from the shadows of our past. The legacy of those who ruled with iron fists lingers in our institutions, our governance, a spectral presence that whispers in the corridors of power. Decisions made in the name of safety can easily spiral into tyranny. We must remain vigilant, for the line between protector and oppressor is perilously thin. Will we learn? Lucas asks, and I can't help but yearn for an answer, for a moment of clarity amid the chaos. The world feels so vast, so impossibly complicated, yet here we are, three souls bound by the weight of history. As we stand before the remnants of a fractured society, I can feel the promises we make to each other, promises that echo into the void, no more silence, no more shadows. We are the echoes of the past, standing defiantly against the darkness, ready to pen a new chapter. Together, we bear witness, and in the flickering light, we forge a future, uncertain, yet filled with a fear